Hello, Cardstack community. I'm Chrissy, the founding director of Cardstack project. Welcome to the land of the Web3. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Hiesboeck, who is the head of blockchain research at Uphold, to give us a sense of what's going on in the Web3 landscape from not only his point of view, but from the larger world of institutions and investments and his view on what is likely going to happen that we need to pay attention to. So welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I want to kind of give Martin an opportunity to kind of introduce what he do and what his organization does and what's the thing that he's most interested in this field that we call crypto and Web3. And so what is the introduction for like the context of what your participation in this field?
Well, as my title says, I'm the head of blockchain research, which means I research blockchain. I do, on the one hand, all kinds of research into all sorts of topics that from the basic technology of blockchain, the different blockchains that exist, alternatives to existing blockchains, different proofs, proof of work, of stake, of time, of observable reputation. I do that with an eye on the future. So I'm trying to identify what the next step will be. And I do more hands-on research because I work for Uphold. Uphold is a wallet, custodial wallet, and a crypto asset management company. And for that, different departments come with different requirements. They ask me certain questions that my team of researchers has to answer. So it's on the one hand, very, very abstract, forward-thinking research. And on the other hand, it's just heads-on answering pragmatic questions that arise every day in the running of a big company like Uphold.
Absolutely. So, when we talk about research, obviously there is just keeping track of all the things that happens, and it's like a wave of information hard for any team to really keep track of, and also there's an aspect of like qualitative versus quantitative. I know you have some thoughts about, can you really measure the quantitative part of blockchain, or we really just kind of storytelling and telling each other what every project is doing? Is that really what's driving the interest, or is there some model of understanding it more quantitatively at this stage?
Well, there's always, in every project, every aspect, there is, what makes the project good is always utility, the novelty, and the community. These are the three things that pertain to every single project. The most successful projects are those that have all three. Right? The most pointless ones are those that only have novelty and nothing else, right? Or only community, but no substance behind it. In terms of blockchain, of course, there's data, there's plenty of data, and it's very transparent data, and that's the beauty of blockchain. But that is also the challenge of blockchain. There are certain things in blockchain that I think are being completely misjudged by the community at this point. We are in the initial adoption phase. We are in the dream phase. The same pertains to Web3. Web3, for example, to me is the horrible marketing term. Is one of these catch-all, say-nothing terms that the media embraces, and they don't necessarily last. They don't necessarily convey things to come. So part of my research is also studying the societal impact of blockchain, what these different technologies mean for society, and where we could be terribly wrong. There are many projects that are now being hailed as the holy grail of this or that. And they actually have enormous dangers hidden that most people who adopt them are not yet aware of.
I think, the technology externality has been the main complaint for even the big tech Silicon Valley, which is that the innovators do their thing and then everybody is come to rescue the societal harm that comes from, news feeds and monetized attention and stuff like that. What do you think is the thing that is most likely to go horribly wrong if we continue this particular trajectory of crypto, blockchain, Web3?
Well, one of the first things that is already going wrong in a way, for example, is a few years back, central banks around the world, and I used to work very closely with several banks, they caught on to the idea, okay, we have all this money, we print all this money, we cut down these trees, or we make this paper pulp, and it costs us a lot of money to print the money, distribute the money. Why don't we make all this money digital? The first digital money projects precede blockchain, right? They existed even before blockchain. And then blockchain came along and just gave us this immutable distributed ledger and this highly secure form of doing money. And then at first glance, it sounds like the natural evolution of money. Maybe Bitcoin itself, the original purest form of digital money that we have, maybe that is. But even in Bitcoin, you can trace things. There was a case just reported on a few months ago where the CIA or the FBI traced a fraud case from 2016. So I think what we'll see in the future is public resistance. The strange thing about crypto is that it started as an anarchic project of saying, I control my own being, I control my finances, myself, my future, and nobody can tell me what to do. And this is the idea behind DeFi, for example. I control my money, I do what I want with it. But in truth, there is nothing more documented than blockchain, right? If I want to do something illegal, I take a suitcase full of cash. I'm not going to do a transaction on the blockchain. And as people become aware of the fact that blockchain is not that nefarious instrument of drug financing and money laundering, but is in fact the most traceable thing in the history of mankind ever.
Yes.
There's going to be resistance, for example, against the idea of central banks releasing a digital currency.
Yes. Yeah, it's like the transparency and then control, and now it's controlled by an entity, that's not in any way have any consensus beyond the political process.
Yeah, and you see, in many economies in the world, not just developing countries, depend on certain gray zone money flows, where people don't pay taxes, where money changes hands under the table, where you earn an extra income that you don't tax. I don't mean that at all in a negative sense. For some economies in certain development stages, this is essential. Many African countries, many Asian countries, if you look at the Indonesian economy, for example, it would completely collapse without the ability of having untraceable cash transactions. And even in the developed world, in Europe or in the States, you have the problem that a large percentage of economic activity depends on cash changing hands. And if that were made traceable, it will complicate things. And if you look at the example of China, China was the first country to introduce the digital yuan. Now we have, 260 million people transacting in a way that the Communist Party of China can supervise. So, theoretically, I'm not saying they're doing it because I think it would require a lot of computing power, but theoretically, you could find dissidents by certain patterns that artificial intelligence would be able to show you that a dissident frequents certain areas, makes certain transactions in a certain amount, and thus through data mining plus the digital money would enable us to identify any type of political orientation. There's lots of one of the first things that changed in the world when Facebook came along is that people suddenly realized, for example, the sexual orientation of somebody who was in Facebook simply by data mining the type of people they were connected with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Not necessarily explicit declaration, but the association and essentially the clustering of traits.
So on the one hand, Web3, if we continue to use that horrid phrase, Web3 is nothing else but our existing internet economy on blockchain technology, and where data science comes into Web3 is by making it secure, but also by gaining access to the data. And this famous saying is there is no such thing as anonymous data. There is just not enough effort, right? So if you, I was involved in a project many years ago of putting sensors into cities to control air pollution in Hong Kong back then. And actually what the problem did was find out where the most concentration of illegal hawker stalls was. Or for example, in Boston, they installed sensors in the sewage system and then were able to find meth labs and the largest concentration of cocaine and weed consumption, right?
Yeah, I think a positive side effect of that is that they were also able to use that same apparatus to figure out COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's always a good side to it. Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely. But I think what people underestimate is the power of data science. And if Web3 happens the way that people now dream that it will happen, then this might bring unintended consequences.
Yeah, and then I think data science and blockchain especially is one of those things where the data on chain is public and is kind of accessible all, but the analytics is only accessible to the few who can pay for it. I'm sure contracting with chain analysis is not cheap. Right? To get someone to look into the Bitcoin blockchain to discover something is a state level, maybe institution state level type of power. Do you think the democratization of data science on top of the shared data would be at least give everybody the same tools, right? Or do you think that any further analysis on this data will end up just going into the wrong direction?
No, not necessarily to the wrong direction, but it will remain in the hands of a few.
Yeah.
We thought, for example, we always have expectations of things to come that usually never turn out the way they should.
Yes.
One of the problems is that the people who carry this revolution in blockchain are by and large people so young that they don't fully remember the dot-com bubble. And when the internet began in earnest, everybody built their own website for their own project, right? There were like 200 different websites for buying pet food, right? And then there was a pet food website, and then in the end, everybody's buying their pet food on Amazon.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So right now we are saying Web3 will change all that. It will make it fully decentralized, fully open. My biggest worry is that full decentralization is simply not the desirable outcome. Because what you've seen this year is very, very interesting in sociological terms. Before January, we talked about people being doxed or not doxed, right? And if a project were only composed of not doxed people, then the risk of it being a rug pull was raised. And if they were all doxed, then it was unlikely to be a rug pull.
Yeah.
First of all, the data doesn't bear that out. There's more rug pulls with doxed people than there is with anonymous people.
Interesting.
Statistically.
Yeah.
And then far bigger sums, because people trust the person.
Right. There's more permission given because of that.
It's more trust. The entire, at the heart of all of human endeavor, of human life, human existence, of economic activity is trust. I'm not going to marry somebody if I don't trust them. I'm not going to send my money to Batavia and they will bring a shipload of spices back from Batavia, as it were, in the 16th century. Even in tribal societies, even before written records existed, everything we do, the reason why we invented language is because of trust. And whereas before we trusted the clan, the family, the village, but not the people of the next village, mind you, and then things grew and we became a nation state, and then we trusted the people in the nation state. The whole beginning of the last century, these wars were about, I only trust the people in my nation state, right? Who speak the same language, who have the same culture. And we are still in that age, and blockchain breaks all that down. And suddenly this dream arises that we do not need corporations anymore. We do not need nation states. Where we are now is at a complete dissolution of the idea of self. You know, we all thought that when the metaverse arrives, we as humans will enter the metaverse in digital form. It didn't turn out that way, because the Bored Ape Yacht Club came along, and now every single Twitter profile is an NFT of a primitive hominid with horrible features, you know, be they stoned, bored, zombie, or whatever. And there is a huge, only last week I came across a project that was governed by a DAO, that itself a huge problem. We are all talking about DAO being the future. As of now, the only entity in the world recognizing DAOs in legal terms is Wyoming. Right? So that alone should give you pause for thought. In that DAO, they openly declare, okay, our DAO is made up of 7 doxed people and 3 NFTs. That's like saying, on the board of my company, there are 7 people, 2 dogs and 1 snake. Right. So the idea of what self is, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and where this is taking us, because from a traditional legal, societal, socioeconomic perspective, being unknown is the antithesis to trust. And just because we have a blockchain doesn't mean we can do without trust in the human behind it.
Yeah, and I think when you think about technology of like DAOs, you can go back and say, well, the whole concept of corporation is a technology, right? We don't think about things that was innovation back then as technology, but they were technology then, right? To use legal code to construct this synthetic person we call corporation and allow them to participate in most places is the type of kind of a Lego block that we always play with, just with different technology, whether it's blockchain or parchment paper. So my question to you, especially when you talk about trust and DAOs, is convince me that DAOs are not just nation state that's based on not nation state, maybe even villages based on clan-based trust. You know, DAOs are very much groups of people who find some commonalities to come together. Are they decentralized? Are they autonomous, or are they even organizations?
They're neither. They're neither decentralized nor autonomous nor organizations, not at all. The word is a complete misnomer. It doesn't matter from which perspective you look at it. Much of what we call decentralized is not decentralized. You know, and the problem is that even the things that are truly decentralized are not without a problem, because being in a state of decentralization does not mean that you're in a state of fair distribution. Right. If you look at Bitcoin, for example, if you talk to Bitcoin maxis, and I fully subscribe to that, it is truly, as it stands, the only neutral project that doesn't have a governing authority in a traditional legal sense. But if you let that run, the Bitcoin incentivizes only the creators of the asset, namely the miners. Right. So the bigger the miners, the bigger the power. The miners have now become stock exchange listed entities, right? A stock exchange listed entity has earnings guidance. It has all the other accoutrements of a traditional stock company. So we end up having, direct or indirectly, we having traditional finance instrument, namely the company limited by shares,
Yes,
controlling the activities of the completely decentralized blockchain network, in a sense. And
right.
nobody else in the Bitcoin network is incentivized to do anything. Right? If I offer a node, if I promote Bitcoin, there's no incentivization other than the miner itself.
Yeah.
And that in the long run might be a huge problem. You know, because we are running out of Bitcoin. Obviously, there's only 21 million, and let's say there's only 1,000 left. Who is going to mine the last 1,000? Right? It's going to be the fastest, biggest mining operation left on Earth. And on the way there, we're going to see much more centralization. So even the most decentralized entity you can think of is not truly decentralized.
Is it because is it because capital likes to pull together the same way water like to run down the gravity and pull in local minima zones? Is it just nothing you can do when you get capital involved, that capitalism in some form, and corporation is the best structure, the most reliable structure that emerges, get invented every single time? Is it because of the nature of money, that because Web3 is money, or?
No. I wouldn't put it quite that esoterically. It's got nothing to do with running waters and stuff. I think it's, again, trust, right? If there is a DAO to govern XYZ, the DAO has to be set up by someone. So behind a DAO doesn't spring into existence out of nothing. There is someone behind the DAO who makes the DAO. And they may remain anonymous. They may forever be undoxed. There may never be a natural persona acting on behalf of the DAO, or not even a legal persona. But the DAO has to come into existence through human action, right? And if that person has already created 50 other DAOs that all worked out well and are all governing profitable projects, then that person is more trustworthy than the 16-year-old high school dropout who creates his first DAO. So at the end of the day, with all the technology, and as much as I love it, what it comes down to is whether I trust the person behind the project.
Yeah.
Right? There is no true decentralization or no true anonymity ever.
Right.
I had a very interesting conversation with a very, very famous person, not famous, but well-known, well-regarded person. And they changed their LinkedIn profile to a bored ape. And instead of he, him, or she, her, they put ape/virtual. It sounds ridiculous, but there is something behind it, right? We live in a society that is far too big for us. We can relate to the family, to the partner. You can relate to your children. You can relate to your family. That is, as far as the eye can see, as far as the heart can hold. These are the people in your immediate vicinity that are dear to you and that you trust or care for. As we evolved from a clan-based, village-based, city-based society into nation states, it became too big, right? And so massive problems of corruptions and factions in a nation state fought each other, right? So we are already lost as an individual. We used to be, everyone had a specific role in the clan. In the nation state, most people who live in a nation state are a mere number or a mere ballot on thrown in the ballot box. They have no other function, no other identity. So we feel kind of lost. And now the metaverse comes along, and the human reaction was, no, in that metaverse that is even bigger than the nation state, even bigger than the world, it has infinite incarnations. It is an infinite metaverse of infinite possibilities. I, as a human being, I'm going to be completely lost in there.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So I want to belong to a subgroup, and I want to be special. And this is where this whole thing with the Bored Apes comes from, for example.
Right.
It gives the sense of
10,000. That's 10,000
Yeah.
Bored Ape, right? That's a smaller number than 400 million something users, right?
Exactly. And they're all alike. So there's a sense of community.
Yes, yes.
But they are all unique, special. So I enter the universe in the shape of a comic figure that binds me in a clan. It could have been anything, right? It could apes. It just happened to be apes. It could have been dogs or mice or whatever, or fairy creatures.
There are penguins and there are cats.
Oh God,
right?
there's all kinds of creatures now, and all sorts of creatures will inhabit the metaverse.
Yes.
And all of them will form groups, smaller subgroups, in which you can feel somehow at home, respected, recognized. Right?
Yes, yeah.
So in any project, whatever it is, in any successful brand, and I used to work before blockchain, I used to work in branding for a long time.
Right.
At the heart of every brand is always these two things first: the uniqueness and the community. And after that, you look at the quality and utility, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not buying whatever. I don't know much about sneakers, right? But I'm buying the Nike sneakers because the Nike sneaker owner tribe is a subgroup of the running tribe, right?
Yeah.
And within that, I want to have these unique sneakers because then I have uniqueness. So community, uniqueness. At no point in the purchase decision of these sneakers have I ever examined if these sneakers are good, well made, made without slave labor, without pollution or whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So it's always about community and uniqueness that comes first. And that same thing is happening in the metaverse.
Yeah, and it's kind of an accidental discovery through these kind of crypto punks that, like, you know, these numbers of 10K is just the right amount to be inclusive and exciting, but unique. And I love your word clan or tribe, right? Like those are words that we used to use in Web 2.0 describing communities. And now, you know, we're recognizing that the human system, the human mind, the least evolved things there's not
We
been
have not evolved at all.
not
We are
evolved.
still in the
Right?
Stone
The
Age.
iPhone has evolved more since iPhone 1 to 13 Pro
Than the human
than the
mind.
human mind has. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are still clubbing each other to death, unfortunately, from clan to clan, and we are still stealing each other's crop and ruining each other's lives.
Yeah.
Nothing has evolved, and the same is going on in the metaverse, right? If you look
Yeah.
at the most successful of these games that are springing up, there are games where bands of like-minded people band together to fight other groups of like-minded people.
Right.
Army against army. Like half of these communities in crypto are called armies.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Why
Marines,
doesn't
armies, yeah.
what are these dogs, like the Shibas? Why don't they refer to themselves as, I don't know, a kennel?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
No, it's a Shiba army, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
you know, all of them have positive sounding, home giving, sense of belonging, bestowing entities, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's an army or a community or a club or a tribe or whatever.
Yeah. And I think the human yearn for belonging, especially in the current landscape of Facebook and Netflix, you are literally a number. When you say that in a nation state, you're just a vote, well, to Facebook, I'm just a monetization ID, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea that Web3 is smaller community and the creation tool for these new boundaries, badges, shields, and signals are easier to do than to create another Facebook. I think it's a powerful kind of tool to make new communities. But I agree with you. Like, I think when we look at, if someone says, what's the first word that comes to mind with blockchain or crypto, and they say trustless, I don't trust that person anymore, right? Like, it is trust. The number one thing is trust. It makes custodial exchanges work. It makes wallet from non-custodial wallet that you trust the person to not deploy code to iOS to steal your funds, because that's a lot of power to do you trust the MetaMask team to not steal your fund? They can clearly get telemetrics out of your wallet. They can clearly get the seed phrase as part of telemetrics.
Yeah.
But you trust that they don't. So even if you go to the boundary of decentralization, trust is absolutely the root of it. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. So given that we are within this human evolution structure, nothing has changed. We are having a technology shift, right? Of some sort, like some sort of database in Mountain View and Palo Alto, and some other database that may be more replicated and centralized. People talking about the technology shift to Web3. Now we have agreed, I think both of us see this as a non-changing human landscape on yearning. And underlying that, what do you think will happen if we continue pushing new technology of blockchain and wallets and trading and these NFTs? What would be the outcome in this shift at the end of the Web3 shift? Assuming this is whether you like the phrase or not, let's say the force will continue. What would be the likely short-term outcome or medium-term?
The biggest dream hype of the internet when it came into existence was before the dot-com crash in 2001. All the excitement, all the high aspirations that now a large number of people who run some of these crypto projects in very high positions don't remember. Right? They were born, they were toddlers when this happened. And unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember all that. I ran the first internet service provider in Taiwan when I was in my 20s. And the hype, everybody there was HTML code. That was just marvelous. You know, I was there when HTML 1.0 was there. Yeah. We were handwriting HTML code. Can you imagine?
With the marquee and blank tag, just for extra.
Yes. I remember the first websites I not built, I just wrote them, you know. And all of that happened way before Facebook and Google. I think we are now way before the dot-com bubble. If I look at the future of blockchain, I think the real winners who may or may not take the dream of Web3 away from us haven't been born yet. I think there are technologies out there that I'm observing that are so powerful, yet as yet completely ignored. And I'm not going to mention any names, just to focus on the idea. I think that most of what we have now, the layer one, the layer twos, the parachains, I think all of this is child's play in the long run. I do not think that any of these, I mean, the fact that we have different blockchains that need to be bridged is, from a philosophical standpoint, completely contradictory to the idea of a digital future. You know, I do not want to need to remember if I bought that stuff on Solana or on AVAX or on Polkadot. And it is unwieldy as a user. Right? You cannot expect the average user with no technical knowledge to make a decision whether Polkadot is better than Avalanche or whatever.
Right.
I'm just dropping names here by random. So then came along companies like Apple, like Google, like Facebook, who dominate, who all still do dominate their respective fields not by being innovative. You know, every branding seminar I've ever been to, people tell me Apple is the most innovative company in the world. It's not. It's the company that makes the things easier to use. It's the best in making things easy, not in innovating. And Facebook and Instagram brought with them a kind of usability and user experience that is way better than anything we have now.
Yeah, I think that the current dApps look more like MySpace, and you just wonder what would be
Oh,
the
yo, like not even way before, way before MySpace. We're like a rudimentary website, you know,
right.
in black and white. I think we have a long way to go before we reach a kind of blockchain world. And Web3 is nothing to get excited about. Web3 is nothing but what we already have, but running with more blockchain technology, being more secure, being safer, but therefore also making a huge trade-off in terms of privacy.
Yeah.
Right. We still have not solved the problem of privacy.
Yeah.
Because life on Earth is not private. Everyone has a claim on you. Your friends have a claim on your identity. The police have a claim on your identity. The government has a claim on your identity. Everyone wants to know your identity, right? We have names for that reason, to establish an identity, right? We give each other names so that we can refer to a person's identity by a handle. At the very end of that is not to get too abstract. It's like the Borg, you know, what is that, Star Trek or Star something? The idea of the hive mind, where the self disappears into a collection of entities without an identity. Maybe we will get there sooner than we think. Maybe I've had some interesting philosophical conversations about DAOs. If in a governing system called a DAO, there can be humans, but also machines, and also NFTs that represent whatever is behind the NFT and that we don't know. And we accept the participation of non-human entities in a societal, a system with a societal function, then we are beginning to scratch at the very essence of what it means to be a human person. And I think this is the end of the metaverse now. That's not a metaverse experience. I mean, games like in a sandbox is Axie Infinity. That's Pac-Man, right?
Yeah,
That's
even a lot of
Pac-Man is to Halo.
Yeah,
You know?
even Halo is Pac-Man, right? Because if you think
Even
about the
Halo is
mechanics
Pac-Man.
of AAA games, they are either RPG of a certain types of spreadsheet updating through 3D avatar, or they are a particular type of shooters with a type of aiming kind of proximity function. So the truth is the genre of game, and Satya talked about like metaverse is like, well, we make Xbox. We know everything that happens in games, and that's the metaverse. I don't disagree with it, other than the fact that the fact that it's 3D doesn't mean anything, right? But
Exactly.
the mechanics are so basic that it is really not emergent. I love this idea that humans and these kind of agents work in conjunction. So there's this thing about how, what if DAOs is not about human voting to approve something, but something will be approved unless you organize the human to stop the automated bot who will approve it. So that this idea that the hive mind, which is data science on top of actions and conversations, essentially becomes a second order function to control the flow. Then human can be human and machine will follow that human. Hopefully that algorithm is open source and running on open machinery and not privately running in a chain analytic data center. That is something. I'm a big believer that if we're going to do data science on blockchain, the data science is to be open.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think the only way to go forward is with open source. as we already have. We already can do that. What we don't have is the fully grown generation of people who understand data science enough. I mean, in your immediate social environment, if you, maybe it's different for you, but in my circle of friends and acquaintances, I am the odd one out. You know, I am the head of blockchain research, and people go like, "What? You do what?" I mean, like, you trade Bitcoin? I said, "No, I don't trade Bitcoin."
Yeah.
Also, it's
You count Bitcoins. It's 19 million now.
it's 19 million.
I do quantitative research on figuring out how many Bitcoin. That's the only metric.
I just count the ones in my wallet. There's not much there.
Yeah, no,
I think, as always, any technological revolution is carried by people who are too young, too enthusiastic, and too driven by dreams and aspiration to realize the dangers hidden behind it, right?
Yeah.
And that is the natural state. Every big revolution was carried by the dumb 19 and 20-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way it's supposed to be, right? Because people of my generation, we can't be bothered. We can't be asked to get out of bed and do a revolution, right?
Right. And then if you know too much, you know that there's no good outcome coming from being part of the revolution, right? Like revolution.
Exactly. You sit on the sidelines, sip your tea, say, right. Fight it out, boys.
Yes. No, I think the you know, I'm quite involved in the world of data science, and I'm personally an alumni at Columbia, and they have a data science institute that I'm a patron of. And it is very, very basic right now. I think this idea of data science, as you know, is limited mostly by availability of data. You ask any person who actually do data science, it's like, I can't get the data to analyze. And the side effect, and I think the privacy thing, Zuko, the only person really pushing for privacy, is not one of these people who are, 19. He's been around for all these things, and he can see the risk of it. And he's been insisting and drumming the tables like privacy. We cannot have decentralized privacy, which I agree with. We need to get people to use it without them knowing it, the same way we finally be able to get people to do encrypted messaging without them knowing it. But it takes some time to do that. I'm personally quite hopeful that the privacy technology get easy enough that it becomes like SSL certificate. It just becomes easy enough that encryption is by default and privacy is by default. There's going to be a big time to do it. But I do believe that the data science explosion will happen when the data that you need to analyze and build, judge, and help inform is more available than if you're Google, than only if you're in Google. The reason why AI researchers work for Google is because they're the only one with the data. Right? But blockchain does democratize data with some privacy, with a lot of privacy risk. But I think this general orientation that getting data becomes easier, like I can just download the Bitcoin blockchain and start mining, that's not a bad, statistic 101 or machine learning 101 exercise for person learning chain analysis, right? So I'm hopeful that with the availability of data through blockchain, there will be more scientists that can train on this data set, and hopefully with the results of the algorithm do more good.
I think for the first time in my observable academic career, we have a situation where academia does not lead. I was just recently at the ETH in Zurich, the one of Albert Einstein fame, right?
Yes.
Beautiful building and everything. And I had an evening talk there about my work with a group of students. And I mentioned, and they asked me, what do you find most interesting? And I told them, the whole Bitcoin as cyclical graph and this whole technology like Constellation does. That is, for me, in my limited scope of understanding, the avant-garde of Bitcoin research is somewhere in the area of where Constellation sits with their approach to the solution. And like the entire room of really, really bright minds looked at me and said, who? What? Constellation who? What is that? And so I think I've never been in the situation that the voices coming from academia are so far behind or comparatively uninformed as in current data science as it relates to blockchain.
Yeah.
Now, you go to any university, they all offer courses now and degrees, and then you go there and they spend 3 weeks explaining what a Merkle tree is.
Yeah.
There's really, there are no courses available that go beyond the most basic, right? Second semester, learn a bit of Solidity. What is a smart contract? I mean, come on, we've been in that for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the somehow the work of crypto Web3 blockchain decentralization doesn't fit within the current permission set. Academia is a clan, right? Like if using your thing, there's a certain types of like yeah, what kind of hats you wear determines what you are and what you look around and say, am I allowed to do blockchain research? And you go do blockchain research, you better, you know, you better make it, right? You better make it, right? I'm not saying you'll lose your tenure, but you certainly lose quite a respect if they gain back through some other means. I am both hopeful that the students who are extremely interested, in some cases, the gatekeeper, the graduate advisors, less so. So you get this weird thing where the higher you go up in the university hierarchy, the more not acceptable this is. But the lower you go, so we have a project right now with NYU, and it was one of those things where you say, hey, democratic model, you just put this brief out there, say, hey, do this research. The research project we floated was NFT carbon credit, right? Using some analytics to calculate the carbon impact, and then making sure that before you sell an NFT, you buy credit on a layer 2 chain to compensate. Kind of a, you know, talking about a mitigation strategy towards the carbon footprint and also telling a story around, you know, climate and NFT. Nobody was quite interested in it, like, you know, and then was like, well, just write it and give it to the student. And the student's like, I love this, rated it very high within the thing. So we're seeing energy from the people who grew up with Minecraft. And it's like, this seems like, you know, a version of that. But there's a lot of gatekeeper in between.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I find more often than not, I find myself in the weird situation that a student approaches me, talks about something that I have no idea what they're on about. I cannot follow for the life of me. And I just nod and say, yeah, I think you're onto something. Go ahead with your research. I hope I never have the chance, and I will never give you the chance to embarrass me like that again, because I have no idea what you're talking about. And that is rewarding in a way when your own students are so much smarter and know so much more about technology. And at the same time, in the same class, you have people asking you, should I buy Shiba Inu?
Yeah.
It is a wild west, and it's exciting. It is the most exciting technology, the most exciting field that I've ever worked in. And absolutely not for the money, for the cryptocurrency, for the trading aspect. I am so past that.
Yeah,
there's so many possibilities open, and so many. I think a lot about the flip side of developments, right? There was on the first glance, for example, the identity, personal identity on the blockchain. I was involved in a project with healthcare data, personal healthcare data, patient data, and then your travel documents, everything on the blockchain. And I was doing this project with my students, and everybody was on the same page. Okay, this is the way to go forward. The only way to avoid your passport being stolen and forged and having false identities is the blockchain. And then one of my students created his own model of a blockchain where he issued enough fake data to embed one set of real data. And it took us a long time to realize that the blockchain in its entirety isn't trustworthy unless you trust the people behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we are back to the problem of trust. If I'm a government and I'm issuing passports on the blockchain, the weakest link in there is the government trusting the company that makes that solution.
Right.
So I don't think we will ever get rid of the human element.
Yeah, yeah. You have to trust the person who make the voting machine to trust the results of the voting in a way.
Yeah.
And we do, and there's validations, but then again, not in every country, not in every regime, and not in every place where corruption may or may not be a bigger part of the GDP.
And even in countries where we trust, we have different factions who will say, that's rigged. All the Trump affair, the stolen election stuff.
Yep.
This is a civilized modern country, and yet we are fighting over a well-documented, well-counted election. The same is happening in every country now. People read it on Twitter. You can challenge an election. We had it in Italy, of all places, where there's never been an issue, but because people get so used to global ideas that happen in parts of this global world, they take them with them and suddenly scream, wolf in a place where there are no wolves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because they saw it on the Twitter from America, right? Or they saw it on the news from America. So they think it must also happen in my backyard.
Yeah. And then this is the reason why it is so important for us to look at every technologist view through a humanist lens, because that's the stuff, and the way we look, the way it's now global, and we have to look at technology through the combination of cultural things. I grew up in Hong Kong, educated in the British system, went to a US high school and then an Ivy League university, right? That's like 4 different perspectives. But very few of my people that went to school with me have such a diverse view, and you can't help but to see the world differently through all those lenses. And I think blockchain has one benefit, I think, in my own travels, is that when I was talking about Bitcoin, when you were able to do that in my previous travel to China, the people in China was talking to me in a similar language. There are some uniting factor where we understand proof of work as the same thing. And hopefully the technology solutions and tools, it's almost like scientific sharing of knowledge, right? We have the same flask and apparatus. Now we just have to figure out how to use it to build a society, or build tools that will lead to the society that hopefully approaches something that human can comprehend. That human scale idea is brilliant. I think we have to make sure the technology we build in Web3 break down this size, this growth-based, massive FANG empire into smaller parts. And hopefully we're seeing that, right? DAOs, there are more DAOs than there are in social network that is already a thing. But there's just tremendous amount of democratization of technology tools to create DAOs. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing at Cardstack is about how do you democratize the software so that you're less relying on the person setting up the account, and you can kind of use this shared key and structure to be the owner of these accounts. And that is really hard to do. It's very hard to have a DAO own a Salesforce.com account or Discord account. There's always going to be delegation of executive who has the admin key in their email address. So could we extend the key management of Web3 to hopefully a replica or replacement of Web2 tools that fit within that model? And that's the work we do in Cardstack. But I do believe that the technology is only a tool, and at the end of the day, we can only build the society we can imagine.
We must not underestimate also the law, right? We live in human societies based on the rule of law.
Yes.
And the law does not yet recognize any technical entity.
That's true.
There's this famous thread going through science fiction of whether a robot has a personality, and the whole Asimov thought. We've gone beyond that. We now have to ask ourselves, at what point in the future is somebody going to ask to marry his bored ape?
Yep.
Right? When do we bestow entity onto a technological concept?
Yep.
And as of now, I talked to several law professors over the last year about the concept of DAO, and they fully understand what it is, but they see absolutely no way to unite this with the law as it stands.
Yeah.
No, I work at Uphold with securities. We also do, traditional finance and securities. And most of the work of our compliance department consists in answering the question, is this considered a security according to a Securities Act that is almost 100 years old?
Yes, almost. Yeah.
We are trying to unite the most advanced blockchain technology with a 100-year-old law. Wrap your head around that. That
Absolutely.
is
Copyright, the same thing. They've decided that AI generated artwork that does not have a human behind that AI algorithm claiming as a work cannot register a copyright. Because copyright is for the protection of the livelihood of the human creator. That's the intent. So there's so there's going to be a tremendous amount of friction. I think more so than even people who are in the legal field trying to write briefs and stuff like that. We have a long way to go to unite. And the thing about law, like language, is that eventually it models the accepted usage. You use the word and it becomes in a dictionary. My hope is that we do something with DAOs, NFT, Web3, crypto, and privacy and AI, and then hopefully some good policy maker follow the contour of the creation and write a law to match it. But at this right now, oh my God, what a clash of legacies.
I got started with blockchain in 2012 in Hong Kong, actually, Hong Kong and Taiwan. And I think it's very telling that many of my friends who sort of were the earliest adopters of Bitcoin have by now retired in places like Bali, and all they do is go fishing and drink beer on the beach.
Right.
I think this itself is very informative about how much we value technology. It's very, very interesting for a while, but at one point you want to return to your human self. And after all, we are still caught in these bodies, and these bodies have to feel comfortable. And once you reach a certain age, they are not that comfortable anymore running 4 miles a day and pulling the grind in Manhattan. And all you want to do is go out in the countryside and play some golf and feed the ducks, as my colleague Martin said.
Yeah. Or the San Francisco FANG engineer who is like now going to be woodworking in Idaho, right?
I'm trying to figure out what I will do when I retire.
Right. Pick up a craft, right? Yeah.
I'll need Bali. I'm going to teach myself diving and fishing in Bali or something.
Yes, spearfishing, right? Like it's very visceral, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So, on that note, thank you so much for your insight. I think we've touched on topics that most blockchain webinar and podcast and fireside doesn't talk about. But I think you revealed a very important kind of possibility space, both bad and good. But at the end of the day, it's a human experience, and we live in our bodies. And metaverse or Web3, we need to connect with each other. And the technology has not been invented. Hopefully, some kids who is listening to the right now in between his Roblox session is going to show us the way.
Absolutely, I think there are exciting times to come for all of us.
Yes,
I hope it turns out well. I hope this revolution turns out well and doesn't fizzle like many others.
Yes. So, my hope is that, there is enough energy and enough capital and enough ability to pay the bills to give people enough time to iterate, to find something. And
there are so many much more pressing problems than blockchain. I work with children in Indonesia and India. I work with poverty alleviation programs and home for abandoned children from domestic workers from the Philippines and stuff. There is so much human suffering still going on. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't all obsess about the price of Dogecoin, right? It sometimes feels obscene. Yes. It turned to when the war in Ukraine broke out, and I had to write my weekly research note for the company. I said, fuck it. I'm not going to write about crypto stuff now when there's people dying 450 kilometers to the east of mine. Yeah. And let's not forget the human element in all of this, I think.
Absolutely. Let's put this in context.
Put that yet on the blockchain.
Yes. And I don't know if it does anything else if we do it in blockchain, and then the mechanism of technology it's certainly only in support of the lived experience, and all we can remember is how we live. So, thank you so much for
Well
enlightening us
said.
today,
Thank you for having me.
and thank you for the community to join us today. And until next time, have a good day.
Goodbye. Thank you.